topic, and something that, again, Colonel Prouty has personal experience with that he can reveal and shed some light on. A very mysterious incident that that perhaps from an outside perspective to this day still doesn't make sense, given what we know in the public record and on the Wikipedia milquetoast bland offering of this history. And that's the 1960 U-2 incident. Of course, this is the shoot down, or so we're told, of the U-2 spy plane over Soviet airspace back on May 1st, May Day. Once again, a very interesting day, as people who listen to the recent New World Next Week will remember. May Day of 1960, and it came at a very, very crucial time during an East-West summit in Paris, and very, very interesting incident. And of course, there is much, much, much more to this incident than we are presented with in the official history books. So let's turn to at least a section of what, once again, is part of that Black Op combo, which includes the collected works of L. Fletcher Prouty and the secrets of the Gary Powers U-2 flight. Let's turn to that DVD, the 1-hour DVD that it contains 4 interviews with Colonel Power on the U-2 flight, for a little bit more background about what really took place over Soviet airspace that day.
On May the 1st, 1960, a U-2 unarmed reconnaissance plane took off to fly a spy mission over the Soviet Union. The pilot was Francis Gary Powers, who was employed by the CIA and was claimed to have been shot down by the Soviet military at 70,000 feet, approximately 1,200 miles inside the Soviet Union. In the following days, Nikita Khrushchev exploited the U.S. government's cover story and walked out of the summit meeting in Paris on May 16, 1960. There is a direct relationship between the U-2 incident and the end of U.S. President Eisenhower's crusade for peace. In response to Khrushchev, the U.S. Department of State issued a statement on May 7, 1960 that, insofar as the authorities in Washington are concerned, there was no authorization for any such flight as described by Mr. Khrushchev. Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty worked in the Pentagon at that time, and he has a very interesting recollection of this event. What follows are 4 separate interviews regarding Gary Powers' U-2 flight.
It said that the U-2 flights over Russia, the Americans shared the information with the British freely, and in return, the British supplied pilots. I saw a picture, it looked like 10, 15 guys, and evidently they were U-2 pilots, and it claimed that these guys were British.
Well, the British had U-2s.
Oh, their own U-2s? Yeah. Oh, okay.
The U-2 wasn't a CIA thing. They couldn't maintain airplanes. SAC maintained the Air Force. The U-2 selected the targets and the time of going and that sort of thing. But the planes were supported by the military. They were purchased by the military. I made one of the original phone calls simply as a function of my office. Mm-hmm. The system I had furnished supplies for them all to their operation, and it was a professional flight operation, which the CIA was authorized to use for spying purposes. The secret of the U-2 was the camera. Geez, the camera was so advanced that's the U-2 that went down with Powers on it didn't have the U-2 camera. It had an ordinary old bomber camera.
Oh, really?
There was somebody ahead of time selectively had taken the Lundahl out and let I even have somewhere the serial number, the one that was on the U-2 that went down, and it wasn't a Lundahl. And
that's another telling.
In other words, they were trying so hard to keep the Lundahl out of the Soviets' hands that.
But they knew that plane was going down.
Well, that plane had crashed previously. It was landing in Japan and run short of fuel at the base where Oswald was working. At the time he was working there.
At Sugi.
And it bellied in, which didn't hurt it. It lands on the belly anyway. It's got a little tiny wheel underneath, but no other wheels. And they brought it to Lockheed, and the Lockheed people rebuilt it. And in the process, it appears, put a different camera in it and maybe some other things to protect secrets. And then that's the plane that flew over the Soviet Union, which is kind of an interesting story.
So to get back to this, the British were able to use those planes, or they bought their own?
I don't know whether they bought them or whether they were
just
made available.
For the job, yeah.
It's just like I was telling you about the Norwegian operation we had, where the planes are based in Norway, but we used non-American pilots a good bit of the time to fly them over the Soviet Union regularly. it's a way clandestine work is done so that it isn't attributable. But of course, there's no way you can deny that where a U-2 comes from. See, it's got to be an American airplane.
But in that case, Gary Powers was in a uniform or a jumpsuit.
Well,
Information with him.
You know, you did the famous pictures of taken of everything he had in his pockets when he went down. Well, the U-2 pilots didn't have any pockets, for one thing. I mean, I'm going to have a guy that's supposed to be a spy and then equip him with everything else, you know, his club card and his automobile license and all that. And plus the trinkets he was supposed to hand out to bribe people to take care of him, and a flag that's saying, I'm a U.S. citizen, I need your help, and, you know, an escape and evasion kit. Well, that's ridiculous. Well, Powers didn't know that was on the plane. The parachute has two seats. One is the one you sit on, and one is your parachute. It was in between the two seats. Somebody had put his stuff there. They took it from him and said, you're going on a flight. They put it. So when he landed, the Russians found it, and they said, here's what he had with him. What do you mean, tell us he's not an American military pilot? All that stuff is contrived. But the facts that came out later proved the whole darn thing was set up that way. He was surprised to find out what they claimed he had on board.
In the facts, I'm not familiar with them. Did he crash land, or did he actually just land?
Well, the distinction in a U-2 is not very great.
Okay.
If you got a runway, it's not a crash. If it's in a field, it is a crash. The underneath of a U-2 has just a small single wheel, and because it's made as light as it can be. In fact, all the pilots called it a glider. And the wreckage that they showed was sent to Kelly Johnson at Lockheed, and he said that wreckage never came from one of our airplanes. It's just some junk they had in Moscow, and took a picture of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the picture of the wreckage of U-2 is not the U-2.
Because they did show big pictures of the cabin and that, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that was
They had the plane. And another thing was that in one of the pictures, the U-2 is shown, and the canopy, the big plastic canopy over the top of the pilot, is laying on the ground, unbroken, not broken. But you couldn't take, it'd be like dropping a glass from 100 feet up, and it didn't break. I mean, they contrived the Russians were trying to trying to prove to the world that they could bring a plane down from 80 or 90,000 feet. And see, that's why they built the plane. They knew at Lockheed that nothing the Russians had could reach the altitude of the operating altitude of the airplane. Therefore, it couldn't be brought down. So when the Russians said they did bring it down, the first thing Dulles said to the Fulbright Committee was they couldn't have reached it at its operating altitude. It came down lower, and then they got it. Well, got it means they put MiGs around it, flying with it. Somebody said that there was a reporter over there who was riding on a train or something like that, who wrote a story about the sky was full of MiGs. But
so they just forced him down.
Yeah, that's when he was down low altitude. Well, and of course, his engine wasn't running. His engine had conked out. See, the U-2 had to have special fuel.
Hydrogen.
And the special fuel was combined. The JP fuel, the ordinary fuel we use like in an airline airplane, and hydrogen, raw hydrogen. And the hydrogen tank only had half enough. So when it ran out, the plane came down right halfway on the flight.
In the middle.
Yeah, predictable.
Right in the heart of the Soviet Union. But it's your position that Alan Dulles didn't know that they had put all this identification in there, or even that the flight was being run.
Well, I don't think I ever said or wrote that. Because
no, you didn't write it.
There's no way to know. It appeared to me that the U-2 people were the most surprised people in the world to find out that plane is up there. The plane was sent by some other motivation, which was very limited, and got it in the air because my office was across the hall from the U-2 people's office. And I provided support. And that morning when I came to work, their office was bedlam. And I wondered, what's the matter? And finally one of the guys said, we just lost the plane. If they lost the plane, they wouldn't have been all shook up. They would have known it was lost. They were shook up because they didn't know a plane was in the air. That's what bothered them. And another thing you should know about this kind of work is the office directly across from me was called Cover and Deception. Every time there's an operation, you have another office saying all the different ways that it couldn't possibly have happened. You know, like robbing a bank. You work out your cover story ahead of time. So you go rob the bank when you have your friend in Las Vegas saying, "Oh no, my friend was with me. We were in room 110, and you know, we couldn't have possibly been robbing a bank. We were out in Las Vegas." You got to have your cover. So, but this is the way the government would work. It's either you two guys, my office, and the cover people, and we all supported each other. See, I provided the hydrogen, among other things.
Well, once again, we will be forced, in the interest of time, to cut that clip short. It does go on for an hour, and there are many, many other fascinating aspects of the U-2 flight that are explored in that conversation. And it is available freely online. Black Op Radio has posted it to their YouTube site. Of course, it is also available via the Black Op Radio combo on prouty.org, so I would direct your attention in that direction once again. But just to expand things out and to show that Colonel Prouty just touched on a remarkable range of subjects in his speaking and writing, let's turn to another fascinating clip from an interview with Colonel Prouty, this time on a